Good morning. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Crystal Morris. I'm the Aboriginal Education Coordinator. I saw a thumbs up on our video conference for the Then Treatment Center. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. First of all, I want to recognize the territory for which we reside here in the downtown, the Musqueam Territory, in the beautiful downtown Vancouver. It's a beautiful sunny day out in the city today. So today we are joined by the Youth One News. I will have Jessica repeat that later, which was formerly known as YouthCO. And she's joining us today for a Aboriginal Youth Learning Circle. And I will introduce Jessica. Jessica St. Jean is the program manager of YouthCO's Aboriginal Youth Program. She will be joined shortly by Dakota Prince. They will be presenting an up-to-date, non-judgmental information session about sex and sexuality. That is key to keeping youth healthy. This workshop will explore stereotyping, social determinants of health, STI testing, HIV prevention, and much, much more. So I'm so glad that you're able to join us today. And for the question format, we do have one video conference, but we have a large number of participants on Adobe Connect. So if you have a question for the video conference, please just kind of wave your hand at us, and Jessica will be able to field your question. And you'll just have to turn on your mic. As for the Adobe Connects, if you type in chat your questions, I will relay any questions to Jessica and Dakota. So thank you very much. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Jessica. She can introduce herself, and then Dakota when Dakota arrives. So that's part of the city and the transit is getting caught up in traffic. So here we go, Jessica.
Yeah, so like Crystal said, I'm going to do a workshop today on our basic HIV and sexual health, which covers all sorts of stuff. Should I look there or there? It doesn't even matter.
Either one.
Okay, cool. So anytime during the workshop, if you have any more questions or comments, feel free to type them in or wave your hand. And that's awesome when people have questions, and so we can answer those. So like Crystal said, I'm Jessica St. Jean, and I am myself am Squamish. So I'm from the Squamish Nation in Vancouver. I'm from YouthCO. So YouthCO is an HIV and hepatitis C organization for youth. And more specifically, I run the YouthCO program at YouthCO, which is our Aboriginal youth program. So we were known as the Aboriginal Youth Program for like 6 or 7 years until very recently, when we were so lucky that an elder, Vanessa Campbell from the Squamish Nation, and also another group of elders chose a new name for us. So I feel super lucky that we got that care into our new name, which is YouthCO. So if anyone wants to practice it, because I know a lot of people have a little bit of a hard time wrapping their head around it at first, it's YouthCO.
YouthCO.
YouthCO. So YouthCO is our new program name, and YouthCO means taking care of each other in the Squamish language. So Squamish Snitchum is our Squamish language. And I think it's just the most beautiful, perfect name, because I think part of our role in taking care of each other and ourselves and other people is taking care of their sexual health. Because HIV, for instance, is an illness, a health condition right now, which is affecting our people at much higher rates than the rest of the population. So we make up about 5% of the population right now in BC, and about 15% of new cases of HIV. So that's a pretty disproportionate rate, as we call it. We'll talk a little bit more in our workshop about why that happens and how that happens, but we definitely fall into a category that's affected by HIV, and where HIV is really relevant, and it's important to know about it and share that information with our friends and family, as well as being youth. So youth worldwide are also very disproportionately affected by HIV. So about 50% of new cases of HIV worldwide are with youth. So if we fall into those categories, it means it's not a scary thing necessarily. It's just HIV is something to be aware of. And I'll stop rambling. It's important stuff. And it doesn't have to be scary. It can be fun, and it can be something we can talk about openly with our friends and family. So I'm going to ask a question to start, if anyone wants to answer that. Has anyone ever heard of YouthCO before? So has anyone ever heard of us?
Waiting online.
Oh, I have a...
We have a hand. Nankaini?
Nankaini, have you ever heard do you know anything about us? Okay, cool. So I'll give you YouthCO in a nutshell. YouthCO is a youth HIV and hepatitis C organization. What that means is that everyone that works at YouthCO and everyone that we work with is under 30. So that's pretty cool, and we're really unique in that way.
Oh, wait, there we go.
I'm muted on purpose. Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, so if you feel like you need to be muted, that's great. You can state those boundaries.
Okay, so somebody did say that, no, we have never heard you before. Debbie McGregor. Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, cool. Yes, we're a youth HIV and Hep C organization located in Vancouver. Everyone that works with us and that we work with is under 30, so we're really unique in that way, and I think we benefit in that way because when we're talking to other youth about HIV and Hep C, we know what's relevant, we know what's important in people's lives. So we're a peer-to-peer organization. We have two main programs. We have support and education. So all of that is run by youth for youth. We do things like support groups for youth living with HIV. We have meal programs, and we have street outreach, and we have education programs that go into schools, and we go all over the province. So we do all sorts of things to lessen the impact of HIV on the youth of BC. We also have a harm reduction model. So, wait, maybe I'll go back to youth for a sec. Why, when we're talking about HIV or sexual health, would it be a benefit for youth to be talking to other youth? Why do we think it would be a good thing for youth to talk to other youth about sexual health? And maybe I'll answer that in a rhetorical question, because I know some people want to be muted. So sometimes talking about sex... Oh.
No, sorry, that's something else.
So when we're talking about HIV and hepatitis C, we're often talking about things like sex, sexual orientation, sexuality, all sorts of stuff regarding sex, and also drug use. So those are two things that sometimes youth might have a hard time really having open and honest conversations with older people, such as parents or teachers. So sometimes youth feel a little bit more comfortable having those conversations with other youth. We also have a harm reduction model. So harm reduction means that people are usually going to do what they're going to do. You can't really tell them not to do what they have their mind set out to do, but we can help them do it in safer ways, right? So we're not here to tell anyone what to do. I'm just here to share some information, and you can take whatever's interesting to you and use that in your everyday life. So I'm going to go through HIV right now, and it's going to be broken up into two parts. So when we talk about HIV, we really want to think about that HIV can affect a person socially. So part of our social wellness, like how others treat us, how others perceive us, and kind of our place in the world, has a lot to do with our emotional, mental, spiritual well-being. as well as the physical, right? So HIV is also a health condition that can affect our body physically. So there's always two things to that, social and physical ways that HIV can affect us.
You ready to roll with the PowerPoint?
Yeah, so maybe we'll start off with the PowerPoint. Let's go to the second one. Do I do that? Okay, so we're going to start off with an HIV and AIDS brainstorm. Because we're a peer youth organization, I don't come here assuming that you haven't ever heard anything about HIV or that you don't know anything. I know that most people have heard something about HIV, and I'm just kind of curious what people have heard about HIV. So if anyone wants to kind of type up on the computer or put up their hand with I forget the name of the treatment center. Nakini. What do we already know about HIV or AIDS, or what have we already heard? I'll give everyone a second because I know the computers can take a while.
There's typing.
Awesome. So we can feel free to name any stereotypes that we've heard or any things that we know aren't true but are common myths, and I won't hold that against you. I know that there's a lot of myths out there and misunderstandings about HIV.
So Gatineau Health Center, it's a virus spread human to human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so HIV is a virus that is passed human to human. Definitely. Anything else we've heard about HIV? What about stereotypes? Are there any stereotypes or myths about HIV?
We have typing happening here. Carolyn offers there are treatments but no cure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh.
It affects the immune system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are also very true. So HIV has no cure. There is no vaccine that we can get that can prevent HIV from passing from one person to another. But there is treatment. So once a person is living with HIV, there's a way to help them feel better and help them live healthy lives, or help people. Are there any places in the world, or even in Canada, or even in BC, that are associated with HIV? So what about places?
You mean like the downtown east side?
Yeah, the downtown east side is a very common understanding about where HIV might be. A common myth. Any other places in the world?
There's some typing happening.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to wait for that typing, but so there are some places in the world, or even some groups of people that can be associated with HIV, and those are some common myths that exist in our society.
Okay, so it said Gatineau, treatments only treat the sickness that come on with the breakdown of the immune system, such as thrush, etc.
Yeah, so that it's just a little bit more detail. Someone had a comment about treatment. So treatment for HIV actually is very complicated, and it's actually on a person-to-person basis, but usually involves helping to reduce HIV in the body. So helping us, if a person's living with HIV, to have less HIV in the body, as well as a higher immune system, so a stronger immune system. So it does a few things all at once that can help a person have a healthy immune system when they're living with HIV.
Sorry, so Carolyn adds there are antivirals as well in the Gatineau Health Center. When you asked about the location, they added Africa is a very common is very common for HIV, AIDS, drug users, and people taking part in risky behavior.
Okay. So Dakota just got here with some things. Yeah. So on my next slide, I actually have a nice little brainstorm that I prepared of common ideas of HIV. Yeah.
One more comment is Carolyn adds, I know someone on antivirals and has had HIV for 30 years.
Yeah. So with medication, HIV, if you see up on my PowerPoint here, I have death, which is a common conception about HIV, because when HIV first kind of came into existence in what would be the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, people were pretty confused about this virus, and it actually took a while to get healthcare professionals and pharmaceutical companies to make drugs to help people living with HIV. So in that time, a lot of people were dying, and sometimes dying pretty quickly. Right now, though, we're really lucky, and a lot of people of our generation don't necessarily associate HIV with death anymore because of medication that can help a person that's living with HIV to live 30, 40, 50 plus years. So if a person is diagnosed with HIV, chances are they'll still carry out their regular lifespan. Yeah. Just come join us. I'll take over this part and you can. Okay. Yeah. So my coworker Dakota just joined us, so she'll probably be coming to hang out in a sec.
Gatanya was asking, what is DTES?
Oh, DTES is just a short for the downtown east side, and that actually shouldn't be underlined, but we'll talk about that in a sec. It should be in red. So the downtown east side is a place in Vancouver where there are a lot of people that are struggling with addiction issues and mental health issues and support issues. But sometimes a lot of judgment can also be put on that area where people are struggling. So people can say like, oh, HIV only exists when people that use drugs, or HIV only exists when people that are promiscuous or have lots of sex. And those are really common myths of where HIV is in our society. That
he's going to bring us into it. Okay. Oh. I'm going to go on the other side.
Did we have a question?
Hello? Is there a question on video conference?
Hey. You guys have a question?
No, we're just here to witness you.
Okay.
Oh,
so far.
Okay. Sorry, if we could just get you to put your microphone on mute. That's great. Thank you.
There's a microphone right in front of us. Can you hear us clear enough?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay.
It's okay. No, it's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so here on my PowerPoint, well, maybe I'll go through this and we'll talk about Dakota. We'll introduce Dakota. So here on my PowerPoint, I have some of the common ideas that people, and also, stuff that people know about HIV or hear about HIV. So I'm going to go through the things we'll be talking about in our workshop today first, just to clarify. So we will be talking a little bit about sex. And this is where we do our disclaimer, like just because I'm talking about sex doesn't mean I assume anyone's having sex or not having sex, or that that's any of my business, because it isn't. I'm just here to share a little bit of information today. And, chances are, like, when we're young, sometimes, between now and, like, when we're 85, we might get down with someone at some point. And this is information that we want to have for when that happens. So if this information isn't so relevant to us right now, that's cool. But feel free to be yourself a peer educator, right? And share this information with your friends and family and your cousins. So yeah, we will be talking about sex. We will talk about blood, so some of the fluids that can pass HIV from one person to another. We will talk about needles, so some of the ways that HIV can be passed as well. We'll talk a little bit about STIs, which stand for sexually transmitted infection. And even though the downtown east side is underlined and in black, it should actually be in red, so that's a very youthy mistake of us, and we will change it next time. So the other things up on this board have something in common. So the red things have something in common besides HIV and AIDS. So Africa, death, sex workers, drug users, downtown east side, and gay disease all are things that people sometimes think of when they think of myths and stereotypes surrounding HIV. And this is related to the stigma around HIV. So has anyone ever heard of the word stigma? It's spelled, is there a... So I have the word up here, stigma. And what stigma means is it means something has negative assumptions, associations, and judgments about it. So HIV is something that has a lot of stigma attached to it, and the stigma can really lead to the myths and stereotypes that surround HIV that aren't true. It can really be compared to a stereotype. So we all know what a stereotype is, right? A stereotype is the same thing. It's negative assumptions and generalizations and judgments about a group of people. So stereotypes are about a group of people, and we always give the example of what are some stereotypes we hear about young people. So some stereotypes, I don't really like to name stereotypes often, but so some stereotypes we hear about young people are that, you know, they're promiscuous and they don't want to get a job, or they drink too much or do too many drugs, and we know that's not true for all youth. So it's a really good example of some stereotypes that can surround a group of people. And stigma is the exact same thing. It's like a stereotype is about a thing, such as HIV. So HIV is a health condition that has a lot of judgment and associations about it. So I'm going to go back to some of the stereotypes and myths that do surround HIV for a second. So sex workers. I have two groups of people here. So I have, well, three groups of people kind of. I have sex workers and drug users and gay people. So these myths about which groups are affected by HIV can actually be really harmful, because when it comes down to it, HIV is a virus that can pass from one person to another. It doesn't affect only certain groups, and affects all humans. So it doesn't really make sense to say that HIV is only a gay disease or only affects drug users or sex workers, because it can pass from one person to another. And it does pass from one person to another. We have about 65,000 people in Canada right now living with HIV. So it is something to be aware of. But what I talked about before of the idea that HIV can lead to death can really make people afraid, right? So people are often afraid of death, and they don't want anything bad to happen to themselves or their family members. And often when we're afraid of something, we can do something called distancing, which is a very human thing to do, which is create as much distance between something, yourself, and the other thing that you're scared of, right? I won't be scared of you, I'll just do it over here. So HIV can't affect me if it happens to those people over there, right? So if I'm afraid of something like HIV, and I tell myself, oh, it only happens in Africa, or it only happens in the gay population or with drug users, I may feel a little bit safer by distancing myself from those groups. But actually, because HIV is a virus that passes from one person to another, that can actually make me more vulnerable if I'm not thinking about HIV and about prevention. So those stereotypes can actually be a little bit harmful when it comes to taking care of ourselves. Yeah, maybe I'll just... Oh, that being said, there are some populations that are more affected by HIV, which I mentioned earlier in the workshop, such as the Aboriginal population, the youth population, and the gay male population, men who have sex with men. So these populations having a higher rates of HIV are not the population themselves' fault, that's for sure. It more has to do with systemic things that we'll talk a little bit later about in the workshop, so why some groups are more affected than others. So that's my wrap-up of stigma. So stigma is one of those social things that can really affect a person's wellness when they're living with HIV. So all that judgment, all those myths and assumptions. So part of our little thing we can do now that we know that information is be ambassadors and make this world a safer place for people living with HIV, right? So whenever we hear those myths, we can say, like, actually, like, HIV can pass to any person, and there are lots of different populations that are affected by HIV. So that's kind of a little bit about what we do at YouthCO, as well as making safe environments for people who are positive or HIV positive. So maybe I'll skip past that for a second and we can introduce Dakota, or Dakota can introduce herself.
Hello. My name is Dakota. I'm the YouthCO Outreach Educator at YouthCO. And yeah.
Where are you from, Dakota?
I'm Ojibwe and Cree from Manitoba.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. So what we're doing is we're just going through this. So it's just up and down for the next. So if you want, I can help you out. So Dakota's going to take over the next part of this workshop. So I'm just going to help her out for a sec. There you go. There's your help.
So we're going to be we've been talking about a lot about HIV. So let's just break it down and really define what HIV is. So everyone text messages here, yeah? And so HIV is an acronym like LOL or BRB, and that stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. And the H stands for human, so any human and it can only be passed human to human. So you can't get it from like a dog or a mosquito bite. And immunodeficiency, that's kind of a long word, so if we break it into two, immuno stands for our immune system, and what our immune system does for us is it helps fight off infections or bacteria that may enter the body. And deficiency, which is when something's deficient, it's lack of or not working as well. So if your immune system isn't working well, then it may be harder for you to fight off different infections or viruses. Which brings me to the V. So V stands for virus. And so something about a virus is there's no cure, but there is treatment. Like the common cold. You can't cure a common cold, but there is treatment and medication for it. And another thing about a virus is that you need a host cell. So in this case, the host cell is something called a CD4 cell. Just down. And a CD4 cell is a white blood cell, and they're kind of like the little workers in your immune system, and they're the ones that fight off the infection. And so when HIV enters the body, it attaches itself to the CD4 cell and says, stop making copies of you and start making copies of me. So it turns the CD4 cell into a small HIV factory, and it starts replicating itself. So there's more, it keeps making more. And so if you have a low CD4 cell count, a healthy CD4 cell count is about 1,200. And when HIV enters the body and your CD4 cell count goes down to about below 200, then you are more you're more likely to get something called opportunistic infections. And what opportunistic infections are, kind of how it sounds, it takes opportunity over a weak immune system. And yeah. So that's kind of how that's like HIV. And so that's what HIV stands for. And we're going to define what AIDS stands for. And what AIDS stands for is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So if I'm on the bus and I'm texting and I have something called carpal tunnel, if I'm texting and I rub wrists with Jessica, is she going to get my carpal tunnel? No, you can't. So it's something, it's a syndrome, so it can't be passed from human to human. What's a syndrome is a collection of symptoms, and So let's just define AIDS right now. So A stands for acquired. So when you acquire something, you obtain it or you get it, and you can only acquire AIDS from it's a diagnosis, and you can only get that from a doctor. So a doctor will be able to diagnose that. And immunodeficiency is what we went over when we did HIV. They just broke it up into two. And then S is the syndrome, so a collection of symptoms. So if you have if there's HIV in someone's body and they have a low CD4 cell count and they have 1 or 2 opportunistic infections, then they could possibly be diagnosed with AIDS. And with treatment, you can always come out of the AIDS stage. And yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I'll recap that quickly. So HIV is the virus that's passed from one person to another and can lower a person's immune system, so can lower the CD4 cell count and make their immune system weak. Once their immune system does become weak, and they start to get a little bit more sick with something called an opportunistic infection. The opportunity being, Dakota said, that they have a weak immune system. They can be diagnosed by a doctor with the AIDS stage of HIV. So the AIDS stage of HIV just means that a person has a weakened immune system and that they've gotten sick. And like Dakota said before, is that even if a person does end up very sick and with a very weak immune system, they can still come out of that and still be simply being a person living with HIV.
So we're going to move forward, and we're going to talk about something called the social determinants of health. So, if you're a human being, what are some simple things that you need to survive? Like the very basics. So you'd probably need clean water, food, exercise, less stress, sleep, medication, just like the very basics. And that's just the very basics that a human needs to survive. And yeah, so, but if we want food, what do we need to obtain food? We're probably going to need money and go to the store to buy food. And if we want money, then we're going to need a job. And if you want a really good job, you're probably going to need good education. And when you want to obtain something like medication, then you're going to have some type of health care in place. And if you're going to want to sleep, you're probably going to want to sleep in a house. And if you want less stress, then you're going to need some support as well. So there's these basic needs, and then there's other needs to meet those needs. So if good health is in the corner there, and we need clean water, food, exercise, less stress, sleep, and medication, then you're going to need money, a job, education, medical care, support, and housing. And did you know that even today, women make 72 cents to the dollar that a man makes, and sometimes for the exact same job? What is that an example of? So it's kind of an example of sexism. And what are some other isms out there in the world? So there's racism, sexism, and other isms. And there's also homophobia, which is what's it called?
Well, homophobia, the meaning of the word means the fear of gay people. That fear can play itself out into like hate and violence and discrimination.
And something like trauma can you take this?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there are some basic things that humans need to be healthy, and but do we all have equal access to those basics in Canada? So in Canada, we're told that we live in a developed country, we have lots of money, and lots of access to jobs, and we know that's not, or even access to housing, and we know that's not true for everyone in Canada. So in order to get just our very basics, we have to need like education, money, a job, and not every single person in Canada even has equal access to these things, and that is why what the social determinants of health really explains is that sometimes there's things about individual people that are not their faults, but are systemically discriminated against. And that can affect their access to things like jobs and money, and then their basic health needs as well. So what we call these social determinants of health are things like racism and sexism and homophobia, and even trauma and addiction, and geography, which means like where we live. And these are all things that can affect our health outcomes in a negative way. So these are things that don't necessarily make it impossible to reach our goals and reach the things that we need, but sometimes they can actually make it a little bit more difficult. Like Dakota was saying, her example of sexism, where women would make less money, 72 cents to the dollar that men make, still for the same job even in Canada, and how over time that adds up to like quite a big difference in income. So we all know that the more income we have, the more leisure time, the more vacations people can take, or whether they can join like a nice gym or go to yoga. So we all know that things like that can really affect, and how much money we have can really affect our quality of life. And things like geography, so whether a person lives like in a city center or in a rural part, where they might feel like there might be different barriers to accessing health. Like, if we live in a fly-in community where the doctor only comes in once a month, like that is a really big barrier to our health. Or if we live in a place, if a person is living with HIV, but the local doctor doesn't really know anything about HIV, so they can't get help with their health condition. I always really like the example of, as well, of homophobia and our access to education, because when we're in school, I think one of the really good things about YouthCO workshops is we really recognize different sexualities and sexual expression, because everyone is different and everyone expresses their sexuality differently. But we all know in school we're kind of a lot of the time given the whole put a condom on the penis and the penis goes in the vagina, and that's all the sex information we ever get. So if say a gay person is sitting in school and that's the only kind of sex education they got, or even another person that expresses their sexuality different, they might not even get the basic education in the education system they're in to protect themselves against HIV. So there's all sorts of different things around opportunity and education that can really put different groups at higher risk for HIV and other health conditions. That being said, all of these things are systemic, so that doesn't mean if a person's experiencing racism, or if they live in a place that doesn't have access to sexual health workshops or a regular doctor, it doesn't mean it's their fault, right? But it might mean that those situations might put them at higher risk for health conditions. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions? So that's just another example of how HIV can affect the social effects of HIV, right? And so we really say that HIV exists in the margins of society, right? So if we have a piece of paper, our margins are on the sides, right? So our margins are on the sides, and this is our society, right? And if all the resources are in the middle, things like good food and healthcare and regular access to money, and these people that fall into the margins of our society can have a hard time accessing the resources. For instance, if a person is homeless and they don't even have their basic needs met of having shelter, they can have a harder time getting those resources. Or if a person is living in poverty, they can have a harder time getting at those resources as well. We are going to move on. So we were just talking about kind of the social side of HIV. Now we're going to move on to the physical side of HIV. So like, how does HIV affect, oh wait, no, we talked a little bit about the physical side as well. So now we're going to do a little bit more of the what HIV is.
So we're going to go into testing. So when we talk about testing, we go through the 5 W's: the who, what, where, when, and why. So we're going to go over testing. So who should get tested? So anyone sexually active and everyone, and anyone engaging in something called risk activities. And we're going to go over risk activities a little later and what that looks like. So what does an HIV test look like? So an HIV test is a free, confidential blood test. And when we talk about confidential, confidential is, so it should only be between you and your doctor, and that information isn't shared unless you share it. And if we're having issues with confidentiality, then you can do something called non-nominal testing. And what non-nominal testing is that you go in for your test, and then they don't even write your name on the test or the file, and they actually give you this little code, and the code is on your test. And when you come in, you can call in and say your code, and then you'll receive your test, your test results. And even if you lose that code, you can't access the test, so you'll have to get a new one. That's how confidential it is, and that's just another way to keep it confidential. And a blood test, so they'll prick your finger and they'll get a little bit of blood from you, and then they'll be able to do the test from there. And there's also something called rapid testing.
Oh, you just described rapid testing.
Oh. And that's like rapid testing, and you can get your results within 5 minutes. So where can we go to get tested? You can go to your family doctor if you feel comfortable. You can go into a walk-in clinic, and you can also go to a youth clinic. And we're very pro youth clinic at YouthCO, because at a youth clinic, the nurses there are meant to and used to working with youth. And if you're feeling a little shy or scared, you can bring up to like 5 friends into a room and access your sexual health needs. And you can also go there to get your free condoms, free lube, and free birth control. And when? So when should you get tested? So a common thing is to get tested once a year, and other people are getting tested in between partners, and that's however you feel like it's going to meet your health needs. And yeah, so an important thing to remember when getting tested is there's something called a window period. And what a window period is, at the time that HIV enters the body to the time that it's going to accurately show up on a test, that window period in between is 3 months. So if I'm engaging in a risk...
Sorry, go. Keep going. No, you can do it.
Okay, so by the time HIV enters the body to the time that it accurately shows up on a test is 3 months. And in between that time, when HIV is replicating, your viral load may be a bit high, and that's the easiest time to have an HIV transmission. So if I'm engaging in a risk activity here and I get tested 2 weeks after, it's not going to accurately show up on a test, so you're going to want to get another test in the 3 months. And if you engage in another risk activity here, then that 3 months gets pushed again. So it's always good to remember to use condoms and lube in between that time.
Question. Carolyn is asking, we in Bella Coola have a youth clinic. Would YouthCO or another organization be able to assist with funding for the IUD for the non-Aboriginal?
That's something I don't think we know anything about, unfortunately. Because we have status and we know that would be more of like the bigger healthcare system. I would maybe ask Options for Sexual Health if they have any. So Options for Sexual Health, they have their 1-800-SEX-SENSE and also their website. But they might be able to help with getting like cheaper IUDs or free IUDs. I'm not exactly sure how that would work without
What
having
was the
status.
number? Sorry, 1-800.
1-800-SEX-SENSE. So on the other side of when a person calls 1-800-SEX-SENSE is a nurse educator, and they can answer any of our questions about birth control or relationships or healthcare. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so that was the window period. And so we're going to move on to the why. So why should someone get tested? Getting tested is the only way to know your status. And when we, and so we also want to do that just so that we can respect our bodies, our partners' bodies, and maybe future bodies to come. So we're going to go over the something called the transmission equation. And so that seems to be a little messed up, but that's it's a math question. So 1 + 1 + 1 equals. Does anyone want to guess? 3. And that's kind of how HIV can be passed, is that 3 things need to be in place in order for a possible transmission. So let's go over one of the ones. So the first thing that needs to be in place is an HIV positive body fluid. So let's just name a whole bunch of body fluids that we can think of. So there is blood, sweat, semen, and pre-cum. And when we talk about pre-cum, when we talk about semen, we also want to mention pre-cum. And what pre-cum is that when the penis is erect, there's a gooey substance on the tip of the penis, and it's always going to be there when it becomes erect, and that is called pre-cum. And pre-cum can contain HIV and semen, so the little swimmer guys, and that can and you can possibly get pregnant from that. Kind of. So it's important so something like the pull-out method isn't the most foolproof method of birth control. And so that's semen and pre-cum. And tears, vaginal fluid. And vaginal fluid is there, and it helps keep our bodies healthy. And it's also known as discharge as well. And that's good. Yeah. And then saliva, breast milk, earwax, and rectal fluid. So rectal fluid is a fluid in the bum, and that just helps poo coming up. So not all of these are HIV positive body fluids. So there's only 5.
There's only 5 body fluids that can pass HIV.
There's only 5 body fluids that can pass HIV, and
Oh yeah, Gatineau Health Center is
all.
naming them all blood, semen, vaginal
Oh.
fluid, breast milk.
That's so good.
It's good to know that we have such great health centers
Yeah.
taking care of our people.
So blood, semen and pre-cum, vaginal fluid, breast milk, and rectal fluid.
Rectal fluid is new to us. Tanya was actually the health center is saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe since this is the health center, I'll just quickly explain that the BC Centre for Disease Control hasn't officially put rectal fluid on the list of body fluid that can pass HIV 101, but it might be expected to be happening in the future. It has been found that rectal fluid has quite a bit of D cells, I'm sure, which she knows will help take HIV into the bloodstream. So it's I think CATI, which is the Canadian Aboriginal Information and Treatment Exchange, HIV exchange, recognizes that rectal fluid can pass HIV. So yeah.
So that's the first thing that needs to be in place is an HIV positive body fluid. So let's go over to the second one. And the second thing that needs to be in place in order for a possible transmission is direct access to the bloodstream. And some of the ways we have direct access to the bloodstream is through needle holes. And there's so many reasons why people use needles. You could use it for insulin or steroids or another reason. But it's not using needles that puts you at risk, it's sharing needles. So, so sharing needles puts you at risks. And when you have a needle, it's like air tight, and if there's HIV in it, it can be in there it can live in there a little bit longer. And HIV is actually a really weak virus when exposed, and it will die within 30 seconds when exposed to air. And another way you have direct access to the bloodstream is something called fissures. And I put cuts in brackets because when you get cut, you bleed out, so you're not taking anything in really, and we're really good at healing ourselves, and it'll just scab over and stuff. So fissures are small microscopic tears. So have you ever flossed your teeth and then you spit into the sink and there was blood? That's something called fissures. And it happens in the gums, it can happen in the vagina, on the penis, and in the bum. And you necessarily don't feel it, but those are ways you can have direct access to the bloodstream. And another way to have access to the bloodstream is something called D cells. And what D cells are they're these, they hang out in the vagina, the penis, and the bum. And what they do is when foreign things come in, then the D cell has these kind of little tentacle things, and they pick up foreign things and they bring it to the immune system to get dealt with. But if HIV enters the body through there, where does HIV want to go? It wants to go to the immune system. So it kind of hitches this free ride right to the immune system. And yeah, don't know. Second. And that's D cells. Oh, and D cells are also present in babies' throats when they're born. So when an HIV positive breast milk comes in, it'll.
We can talk about that in a different
And
section.
we're going to be talking about that more in a different section. So that is direct access to the bloodstream. So we have So the first thing that needs to be in place is an HIV positive body fluid, and the second thing is direct access to the bloodstream. So we have these two different things, right? But how do they come together? And we're going to explain that through our fun activity called Robots.
you want me to hold them?
Oh, wait, just wait. Back to.
Or do you want to hold them? You should probably sit here.
Okay.
Or do you want me to hold them?
So while we're making this change, there was a question about the services for YouthCO and going into communities. And there was a small discussion. I didn't have the details to be able to answer the people on Adobe Connect about coming to communities to do a presentation to their youth. How do they do that? How do they request that? And what kind of time frame are you looking at for booking? And how are communities chosen? And is there a cost to communities?
Okay. Well, that's a really great question. So we do travel across the province, but unfortunately, we do not have a budget to travel with our budget this year. So the way that we do travel when we don't have a budget is when communities see a need for us, they often find a way to pay for it through the health center and sometimes even through the school. So for instance, we go up, if you're looking for an example of how you can find a budget for that, is we actually go up to Bella Bella usually about 2 or 3 times a year, and we work with the health center there and with the school. So sometimes if there isn't too much of a budget available, the health center and the school and sometimes even the band will share the cost of bringing us up. So sometimes there is ways to find that money through the HIV prevention programs. Sometimes, a lot of the time in the school, they will have a budget for sexual health and don't necessarily even have someone teaching the sexual health, and they can use that budget. But if you want, you can email me and we can discuss a little bit more of how that can happen. We usually take about usually about 1 travel per month. And at this point, we'll be looking into booking for January, February, or March. So it isn't something that has to happen very soon, so we have lots of time.
Stay tuned for station identification.
Oh, did we go offline?
No, we have a little bit of technical difficulties. They can see you on Adobe Connect.
Okay.
But there we go. Thank you, Steve. Overrode. Oh, still can't see us, Steve. We can see the Vancouver office.
I don't set Vancouver, but where?
Down near.
That's in at Health Canada office.
Just kidding, don't ask questions.
We just want to cut to us because they have a presentation here. Technology is amazing.
I hate it.
Maybe I'm doing something wrong. It's how much I rely on our technical support people. Working on it. And
Okay.
see how important a role my cell phone plays, because we're able to smooth things over as presentations go along by texting, like you said. How many people here text? I text our support people when something like this happens, and we're trying to repair it, but now I'm relying on email and Catherine.
You left for 1 second and.
Okay, so we're trying to switch back to so she can talk here and show them
Oh, Stephen needs to know.
this. Okay, I did. I let him know.
Okay.
He's working on it then.
Then that'll take a second.
It'll be
Right.
2 seconds.
Well, when we're doing that, maybe I can start looking at the computer. Because you should be able to control the back and forth.
I just want to go go
Just
home
in
and
case
play
we
with
need
my Mac.
Which one is it?
Oh no, it's right.
I don't really know what to do with it
I
though.
could
You
count
have
to
to
my
like
cell
make
phone
it
at the
like
same
all
time
I do
too.
is like type
So,
and like go on the
cell
computer.
phone right there.
Because you can like get apps for it and make it do cool stuff.
Do you just get one?
Yeah. I don't really even know what I want on it. I'm like, I don't really want to play games necessarily. Like do my finances.
Just watch movies and play games.
Well, I didn't have a TV for like 7 years, and
Whoa.
Is
And
it?
I finally got one, and I got like a smart TV, so you can like go onto Netflix with it, which I didn't even know existed until I went into Future Shop.
You never knew about Netflix?
Hmm?
You
Oh no,
should-
I didn't know that smart TVs existed.
Crystal Boy's Orange is the New Black.
I already finished it.
No, I didn't.
No.
Crystal, what are you seeing right now?
Tiny treatment center sign.
Oh,
What are you trying to see?
I'm trying to see our room
That's a big button.
in the bigger box.
I think those I don't know.
Earlier, I heard that Still a Nation joined us, so they must have left the room.
They were there. They would just have.
There we go. Ta-da! Thank you.
You're so great.
all right.
Okay, let's get back to it. So, 3 things need to be in place in order for a possible HIV transmission. So, an HIV positive body fluid, direct access to the bloodstream, and to bring those 2 things together, we have something called our robots. And what our robots are, so why do you think we might use robots for this?
To show our risk activities.
To show our risk activities. Because robots are genderless, they're ageless, they're timeless, and they can also be any gender too, so it's not a set gender. And that's just reiterating that, HIV can be passed from human to human, no matter your age, your race, or your gender,
Or sexual orientation.
or sexual orientation.
That computer works lately.
So, yes. So these are risk activities that can possibly transmit HIV. So the first one is
Can we get a little bit more of a close up on these? Is that possible? I think we've done it before. Okay, that works.
so this one is sharing piercing equipment. So sharing piercing equipment is a risk for HIV because the needle gives you direct access to the bloodstream, and the needle also has a little bit of a hollow tip, so HIV can be present in there. And if we're going to be doing going to a professional place to do piercing, then we always want to make sure that they're opening a needle in front of you and using it. And if we're going to be doing piercing at home, then trying to make it as sterile as possible.
Yeah, so if it's at home, we want to make sure it's as sterile as possible so we can boil our needle and put rubbing alcohol in it and never share it with another person if we choose to be doing that at home.
So sharing needles and sharing tattoo equipment. So HIV is a weak virus outside of the body, and it can, inside of ink, it can live a little bit longer. So if we're getting tattoos, we want to always make sure that they're opening a new needle in front of us. That they have, they teach you how to properly take care of your tattoo after, and that they're pouring your own ink in front of you.
And it's the same thing if tattoos are happening at home or at parties. Everyone gets their own ink, their own needle, and we never share those things.
So these robots, sharing needles, and these robots look like they're using it to get high, but there's so many other reasons why we use needles, and it's not using needles that puts us at risk, it's sharing needles that puts us at risk.
Great.
So unprotected vaginal sex is one of the three higher risks for transmitting HIV. And if we're going to be having vaginal sex, there's safer ways to do it, like using condoms and using lube.
So using lube is really important because it can help prevent those little fissures, which can be the access to the bloodstream.
So unprotected anal sex. So using condoms is a safer way to do that.
And lube.
And okay, so this is
Mother to baby.
Mother to baby. So it's not actual like being pregnant that puts you at risk. It's during the process of birth, lots of fluids are being I can't do it. Okay. It's good. I don't know. I just feel.
Okay, just take a deep breath.
So D cells are present in babies' throats. So if HIV positive breast milk.
Oh no, this is about birth.
Oh.
Mother. Do you want to hold them? Maybe it'll be easier for you. Do you want to move here? The computer's in the way on that one. So
this is birth, and when a woman becomes pregnant in Canada, she would get tested for HIV, and if she is HIV positive, then she gets put on treatment. And what treatment looks like is taking the same set of pills every day for the rest of your life. And so when birth happens, they if she's HIV positive, then they'll give the baby a bit of HIV medication as well. And yeah, that's birth.
So the chances of passing HIV onto the baby with medication in Canada is very, very small. So if a woman does get tested and is HIV positive, she can still have healthy HIV negative babies. So it's a less than 2% chance in BC, especially.
So this robot is breastfeeding. And because D cells are present in children and babies 2 and under, so they can absorb and grow really, really fast. And there's so when breastfeeding, there's other ways to do that. You can also go to like a breast milk bank, or you can put your baby on formula and raise HIV negative babies, which is good. Unprotected oral sex. This is a lower risk, but still a risk. So there's something called a dental dam that you can use when performing oral sex that can be safer. So this is our no category. So these are, it's kind of a lot, but these are like myths in ways where it's not possible. And this is also for like destigmatizing HIV. So sharing food and cutlery is not a risk for passing HIV. Sharing toilets is not a risk for HIV, and not a risk for any other STIs as well. So dog bites. even a cute little chihuahua is not a risk for passing HIV, because again, it's a human-to-human virus, not human to chihuahua, or chihuahua to human. So kissing is not a risk for HIV. You can kiss. Fighting, not a risk for HIV, but not the best life choice either.
Somebody's asking about, Carolyn is asking, can we get these robot people friends too?
So they can email us about that.
Okay.
We do trainings for them.
And sharing cigarettes, not a risk for HIV, maybe for other health conditions, but not HIV. Shaking hands. This goes for high-fiving and props as well. Not a risk for HIV. Tears. Crying. Not a risk for HIV. You can always be... Okay. That's great.
It's okay. A little humor is okay.
we like humor.
I'm not sure the people on Adobe Connect. No, we're just kidding. Okay.
Okay, so crying is not a risk for HIV. Thanks, that really lightened me up. Thanks you for sharing. We like sharing. So tears, crying, you can always be a shoulder to cry on. Not a risk. So this is our manual sex robots, and when we say manual sex, we mean like hand jobs or touching each other's genitals. But if we're going to be doing that, making sure that one hand stays to one place and you're not like sharing or swapping, because then that's a risk.
So basically what Dakota means is if we're touching our partner's junk and then we're touching our own, just wash your hands in between, because that can pass STIs, potentially.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So, bathing together, not a risk. As long as it's platonic, no funny business, then it's not a risk. Mosquito bites. Human to human, you cannot get. It is not passed. It is not a risk. Rolling in someone's blood spill. Not the best life choice, but not a risk for HIV. Not a risk. Which is this one? Sneezing in someone's face. Not a risk, but maybe for a cold and not the best idea. Blood in the eye. So CSI did an episode where someone had gotten HIV through blood in the eye. That is a myth. It cannot happen. That's robots.
So I put the 3 harm reduction ones down there, separate.
Okay, right. Okay. So these are safe. These are our harm reduction and prevention slides. So getting tested is the best way to reduce risk, because then it's the only way you know your status. Using condoms is a good one too. And you can get them free from your health clinic or youth clinic. And not sharing needles is a great way to reduce risk as well. And that's robots. So, So we're coming to the end, the grand finale, and we usually do that with a condom demonstration. And so what's something that we need before we want to get lucky with someone? Before the condom. Before lube. So we're going to need something. Is there a question?
No.
Oh, so we're going to need something called consent.
Somebody said get tested.
And get tested, yeah. So there's different laws around consent, and that's meant to keep us safe. And so, by law, you need a consent needs to be a good and solid, confident yes. It can't be hands in the pocket, I don't know, or yeah, sure. It needs to be a confident yes. And also, someone in a position of power, so like a coach, a teacher, a boss, they cannot ask you for sex. And you also can't be drunk or high when giving consent because you can't give it. And those laws are there meant to protect us and keep us safe as youth. And so, and if we've ever experienced these things, we can always talk to somebody about it. And so that's kind of consent.
Are we going to be showing our
No.
So now that we have consent, and this demonstrator has consented.
It's a little bit, so we don't have Steven in the office over there, so it might be easier if we can put it on the table to go there. Oh, there we go. Thanks. Oh, okay. There we go.
So, the demonstrator has consented, and we have consent. We're gonna have our condoms, and if you're gonna go out on a night on the town, you might want to put a couple of these. Don't keep it in your wallet or pocket for a really long time because the heat can break it down. So there's 3 things that you're going to want to look for when you have your condom. So what do you think one of those things are?
Hair.
Air. Oh. Yeah, so we're going to want to check for air. So the way you can check for air.
Expiry date. Somebody put expiry date and somebody else put lubricated.
Yeah, so this one's not lubed, just for demonstration purposes, but you're always going to want to get one that's lubed. And so you're going to want to we're going to check for air. And the way you do that is something called the pillow test. So you're going to fold it in half and kind of like push it around. And if there's still air inside of it, then you know that the condom is safe and there's no puncture or tear in it. And so that's checking for air.
No damage to the package.
No damage to the package, yes. And so we checked for air. You're also going to want to check the expiry date. So you turn it around, and it says it expires in 2016 of December. So we got a little bit of time left. So we checked for air. We checked the expiry date. What's the third thing we're going to want to look for? I heard flavor. You can if you would like to.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Do-do-do-do-do.
You're going to want to check for something on the back. You're going to want to look for a not so sexy saying that says, latex condoms are intended to prevent pregnancy, HIV, AIDS, and other sexually transmitted infections. So you know that it's a legit condom, and that's what you're getting. There's joke condoms out there that I don't get, but apparently if you like blow it up, it's like it'll turn into like a giraffe or something, or gag for, I don't know. It's not funny. I don't get the humor in it, but they're out there. So that's why you're going to want to check for the not so sexy saying. And you're going to look for all these three things. And when going out, it's a good thing to check these before you take them out, because chances are in the heat of the moment, you're not going to turn on the lampshade and read that not so sexy saying. So, yeah. And speaking of heat, there are two things that break down condoms. Heat and oil. So even something like a lip gloss that is oil based can break down the condom, and that's something to be aware of.
So somebody is adding to what you say. Do not store them in your wallet, guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be okay if you were going out that night and you put it in your wallet then, but
Sorry, more comments. Don't double up your condom.
yeah, don't double up your condom too, because the friction and the heat can break it down.
That just means wearing 2 condoms at the same time.
Yeah, so I don't recommend wearing 2 condoms at the same time. And so yeah, we checked for those. So there's a jagged edge side, and then there's a straight side. So when you're gonna open your condom, you're gonna want to kind of push it to the side a little bit, and then take a corner from the jagged edge side. No, don't double up. And so then you're gonna want to give it a little tear. So you're gonna want to pull this out, and so we have the condom out, and there's kind of like there's 2 ways that this can happen. So one way, it kind of looks like where the rim is folded in, it kind of looks like a toque or a baby nipple. I don't know. So if it kind of looks like a toque, think cold, not ready. If you flip it over the other side, it's kind of rimmed in, and it kind of looks like a sombrero. So think fiesta, hot, hot, hot. So that's the right way to go. So this kind of like nipple looking part is called a reservoir tip, and it's meant for when ejaculation happens, that it has a place to go. So when you put it on an erect penis
Or a sex toy.
or a sex toy, you're going to want to pinch the tip so that there's no air in it, and then put it on. But if I get it the wrong way, should I just flip it over and then use it? No. Why wouldn't I want to do that? Because pre-cum's present and it's already been touched, and then you'd flip it, and then that's still exchanging fluids, and that's something that we don't want. So pinch the tip, put it on the tip of the penis, and then roll it down. And you want to put it to the base of the penis, and then we'll let the magic happen, however that may look. And then while the magic's happening, it's important just to maybe feel down there and make sure that it's still on and everything's good. And then when you're finished, are you just going to want to pull it off? Ouch. No, probably not. So when the magic is finished, you're going to want to try to roll it off and keep whatever fluids are in there. And then when you're finished, are you going to just wash it and hang it up to dry? So these are one-time use only. And so you're probably just going to want to tie the end, grab a piece of tissue, wrap it in the tissue, and throw it into the garbage. Do not put it in a toilet. These clogged toilets like no tomorrow. And when someone has to unclog it and they pull out one of these, it might be an awkward conversation to have. So that is that. And our lubricant. So making sure that it's a water-based lube, because again, oil can break down the condoms. And yeah, that's this is like a lube that you can get at any like health clinic and stuff. So it's good. That is the male condom, and these are called female condoms, but these can also be used in a bum. So we don't like calling them female condoms at YouthCO, just to be more inclusive, because everyone has a bum. And yeah, so these kind of look intimidating at first, but once you get to know them, and I'll show you what this looks like. So again, there's a jagged edge side and a straight side, and you're just going to want to take out the side and pull it up. So this is what it looks like. I think it's better if it's like in my front of my hair, because you can see it. This is a female condom, and so it kind of looks like a really big condom, but there's like this kind of like ring kind of thing in here, and I'll take it out just to show you. So it's really flexible and soft, and when using this, you're going to want to turn it in kind of like a figure 8, and then but people want to express their sexuality differently, and they will explore the bum, and that's fine if you have consent. If it's consensual sexual expression, that's your judgment, and that's fine. So you're gonna want to make if it's not for you, it's not for you. So you're gonna want to make the figure 8, and then put it in.
With anal sex, though, we can people want to leave the inner ring out. So for anal sex, no inner ring is used, just for vaginal sex.
Mm-hmm. So if it's being vaginal, do a figure 8, kind of put it back in, and then this is a vagina for all intensive purposes, and then so figure 8, and then you push it like in, and then it kind of goes in, and what it does is that the ring will open, and then it goes into the vagina, and then the ring will sit on the cervix, and it'll be in there. Putting this in half an hour before intercourse is best, because then it'll adhere to the walls of the vagina, and it won't have that kind of like plastic bag sound. So that's what, and then if it's you can also put it on a penis and then put it in, and I didn't get that. And so you just like put it in, and then that's where it is.
Jewels in a ring.
Jewel, are they talking about vajazzling?
Like vajazzling. So yeah, and then you can put it on a penis as well, and then insert it. And yeah, it's kind of and it can also be used as moisturizer. So are there any questions? We're getting lots of comments. That's good too. Questions, comments, concerns?
There was a discussion on here earlier about somebody saying that they teach HIV 101 to the youth, and they were asking, one of the other participants asked where she got the curriculum from for HIV 101, and they said Healing Our Spirits and Chima Mook. So just an interesting resource for further information as well.
And you can also access and like get information from us at YouthCO. You can just like shoot us an email. We'd love to hear from you.
So I'm not sure if there's any, I think Stolo left the session. They were on observing earlier during the presentation. And I'm not sure if Nkini has any comments or questions. You're all in, it is all anonymous there in Nkini. So if there's any comments or questions, please go ahead and ask them now. It's your opportunity. Thank you too. Thank you.
Williams Lake is funny.
Oh, here it is. Somebody is asking, what's the best method for inserting it anally if you don't have the ring? Just worrying about puncturing the condom if you use fingers.
That's a good question. So, if this insert of condom is going to be used for anal sex, so we had a few comments like, oh, anal sex, I don't like that. That's cool. So, you know, not everyone needs to be into everything, and that's really great, but if people are interested in stuff, there's, you know, no judgment as long as it's consensual sex and everyone is into it. So the way that this can be used for anal sex, with the, like Dakota said, condoms can be used to make sex toys safer, as well as insert of sex with penises. So we take that inner ring out, and we can insert the condom on the sex toy or the penis into the bum. So we put that, and we can insert it into the bum on the sex toy or penis. And then after that, we can kind of leave it, and it will be in the bum. Yeah.
Gatanio's offering a website here. It's www.sexualityndu.ca. They say that's an amazing site.
Yeah, so that's the Options for Sexual Health website, and it's pretty great, that's for sure. Yeah. Also, someone mentioned about resources and learning how to facilitate. So CHIMAMUC, which is the program, the Aboriginal program out of the Center for Disease Control, does trainings a few times a year. So if anyone wants to contact CHIMAMUC, Crystal can put you in contact with them, or even I can put you in contact with them if anyone has questions about their trainings.
So any final questions or comments? I want to thank you, Jessica and Dakota, for joining us, and the other Jessica for being here present with us today. And then Nkini, is there any more comments, questions, concerns? If there is, I'm just going to wrap things up to talk a little bit about some of our future sessions coming up. On October 1st, we have a youth learning circle with Elder Jerry Ullman. He will be doing a presentation, and a bit of his presentation will be about the drum and healing. And on October 2nd in the evening, Dr. Kim Rossmo, we're finalizing the details on that. He is doing a presentation on the missing and murdered women in the downtown east side. October 8th, Feeding Your Family Delicious Food. That's a live presentation in a kitchen, so it should be interesting. We are going live out to UBC, one of their kitchens there, with the First Nations Health Authority. October 15th, be sure to join us on Aboriginal career programs at UBC, the Chinook Indigenous Business Education. We have another youth circle on the 16th on Aboriginal midwifery as a career choice. We do have a couple registered midwives joining us from across the province. October 30th, we have another presentation on midwifery for the learning circle. November 5th, a learning circle, we have Fantastic Foods for Babies and Moms. And November 13th, we have Jessica and Dakota back for a YouthCO presentation on contraception. November 20th, we have healthy eating for wellness and chronic disease management. And November 7th, for any of you students looking to go into university, we do have UBC, some of the recruiters coming in to do a presentation about the Aboriginal student recruitment process. And they will be doing a series of presentations into the new year. How do we support you in university? So that will be a series if you're thinking about your career. Bye, Nankani. Thank you for joining us. And yes, so please feel free to contact us and give us any feedback about today's presentation or any presentation or any ideas that you may have for future youth circles if you have a facilitator in your area or want to spotlight a project in your community. Please feel free to send Catherine, Barry, or myself a message. Do follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. So thank you for joining us, and Heichka, and have a great day. Thank you again. Bye.